February 12, 1957, 11:41. A paper pass slid across the rear door ledger, rain dripping from its corner, while Harlem held its breath and someone misread the silence. Not hidden, not guarded, just there. A narrow door behind the club, paint worn thin, handle polished by years of hands that knew when to touch and when not to. Harlem did not dress its rules in signs. It let memory do the work. Bumpy Johnson stood a few steps away from it, coat buttoned, hat low. He was not blocking the door. He never did. He stood as if he had always been there and would be there again tomorrow. People adjusted themselves around that fact. The alley was wet. Rain earlier had left the bricks dark, the kind of dark that swallowed reflections. A delivery truck idled too long at the corner, engine coughing once, then quiet. That was the risk. Not danger yet, just attention leaning the wrong way. Someone else noticed it. A man came down the alley slow, hands visible, shoes clean for this side of the building. He did not look at the truck. He looked at Bumpy, then looked away again. Respect did not need eye contact. He stopped at the right distance. "I was told to use the back," the man said. He didn't ask who told him. He didn't say when. He spoke as if the door had already agreed. Bumpy waited. Silence stretched, not sharp, not tense, just long enough to let the alley decide whose it was. The truck engine cut. A door closed somewhere up the block. The risk passed without being named. Bumpy reached inside his coat. The paper pass came out flat between two fingers. White stock, club stamp, rear entrance, one use. The ink was still dark, fresh enough to matter. This was the anchor, not the door, not the alley, the paper. He laid it against the brick, not into the man's hand yet. Let it be seen before it was owned. "You know what this is," Bumpy said. "Yes." "You know what it is." The man nodded once. Bumpy slid the pass forward. It was false. Not in appearance, not in print, false in intent. It would open the door, but not the way the man believed. It was not permission, it was a measurement. The man took it carefully, like something that could stain. For a moment the alley held its breath again, not because of violence, because of choice. Paper had weight when it carried judgment. Bumpy's voice stayed low, calm, almost kind. "Don't rush it." That was all. No warning, no instruction, no threat. The internal deadline set itself without clocks. By morning, the city would know what the man did with what he was given, not because anyone would tell it, because doors remember. The man folded the pass once and slipped it into his coat. He did not head for the rear entrance. That would have been too clean. Instead, he stepped back the way he came, confidence trying to sit where certainty should be. Bumpy did not watch him go. He turned slightly enough to face the door. The handle was still. The ledger inside waited for marks it did not forgive. The alley emptied. Rain began again, light this time, tapping the paper sign taped near the trash cans. It peeled a corner loose. No one fixed it. Bumpy remained where he was. The pass was already working. Inside the club, music carried like a low tide, never touching the walls. Glasses clinked. Laughter rose and fell in practiced rhythms. None of it reached the rear entrance. That door listened to different sounds. Bumpy stepped inside only far enough to see the ledger resting on its nail. Brown cover, soft at the corners. Names pressed into the pages by years of ink and pressure. It did not list everyone, only those who mattered long enough to be recorded. He did not open it. He did not need to. The pass was already out in the city, moving through hands and thoughts that believed paper carried authority by itself. Some men thought stamps were power. Others thought roots were secrets. Both were wrong in the same way. Bumpy leaned against the wall, close enough to feel the door's presence without touching it. This was how he measured nights, not by noise, by what did not arrive. Someone brushed past him, paused, then kept walking. A nod, nothing more. Respect was quiet when it was real. Outside, the rain strengthened. Water ran along the curb toward the storm drain, carrying cigarette ends and dust. Harlem cleaned itself this way, slowly, without ceremony. The man with the pass would be deciding now, not quickly. People rarely rushed when they thought they were safe. He would weigh the paper. He would think about shortcuts. He would remember the way Bumpy spoke, soft enough to be mistaken for mercy. That mistake was common. Bumpy's phone rang once. He let it ring again before answering. "Yes," he said. A pause, a voice on the other end, careful, saying very little. "Enough." Bumpy listened, then ended the call. Nothing had happened. That was the message. Nothing yet. Good. The visible danger from earlier had dissolved, leaving only residue. The delivery truck did not return. No patrol car slowed. No raised voices cut through the music. The night behaved. Bumpy straightened his coat and moved away from the door. He crossed the room without drawing attention. Men made space without knowing why. He took a seat where he could see reflections more than faces. Time moved without being named. A bartender wiped the same spot twice. Someone laughed too loudly, then stopped. The club kept its balance. Bumpy's mind stayed on the paper. Paper was honest in one way. It did not pretend to be more than it was. Men did that. Paper simply waited to be used correctly or incorrectly. The city watched the difference. Near midnight, a runner came in from the front, breath controlled, eyes alert. "He didn't use it there," the runner said, voice low. Bumpy nodded once. That answer narrowed the path. Fewer doors now. Fewer chances to hide a bad choice inside a good one. The internal deadline pressed closer, not urgent, just firm. By morning, the man would either understand what he had been handed or prove he never did. Bumpy stood again. He returned to the rear entrance, not to open it but to stand near it. Presence was enough. It always had been. He spoke once, not to anyone in particular. "Paper remembers," he said. It was not a warning, it was a fact. The rain slowed. The door stayed closed. Somewhere in Harlem, a man was learning that passes did not grant belonging. They revealed it. The night continued toward its answer. Morning did not announce itself. It arrived the way truth does, soft, unavoidable, already decided. Bumpy Johnson stood near a window that faced the street, not looking out, just letting the light touch the edge of his hat. Harlem moved below him. Deliveries, doors opening, men who had slept and men who had not. The city carried on without checking who deserved it. The paper pass had not returned. That mattered more than if it had. He waited, not for the man, for alignment. When things line up, you feel it before you see it. The room settled. The noise found its level. Only then did Bumpy step outside. The man came into view an hour later, not from the rear, not from the front, but drifting into the block as if he belonged there by habit. His coat was buttoned wrong. His walk had lost a measure. He still had the pass. That too mattered. They met where voices did not echo, a small space between buildings where the city paused before choosing a direction. No witnesses stayed long there. People felt the weight and moved on. Bumpy did not close the distance. The man stopped himself. "You look rested," Bumpy said. It was a courtesy. It sounded like one. "I didn't sleep much," the man replied. That was an answer to a different question. Bumpy let that sit. Silence was not a tool, it was a test. Men filled it when they needed to explain. Strong men did not. The man shifted his weight. "I used it," he said. Bumpy nodded once. He did not ask where. "Not there," the man added quickly. "Somewhere else." "Why?" Bumpy asked. The question was calm, flat. It did not accuse. It did not invite defense. It asked for shape, not excuse. The man hesitated. That was where truth lives, not in words but in the space before them. "I thought it would travel," he said. "A stamp is a stamp." Bumpy's eyes stayed steady. Paper doesn't travel, he said. People do. The man swallowed. The confrontation did not sharpen. It deepened. This was not about being caught. It was about being seen correctly. Bumpy gestured once small, toward the man's coat. Still clean, he said. The man glanced down, then back up. I didn't want to crease it. Bumpy almost smiled, almost. That was the truth surfacing. The man believed respect was about keeping things untouched. Harlem knew better. Respect showed in use, not preservation. You kept it safe, Bumpy said. Yes. From what? The man did not answer. That was enough. Bumpy stepped half a pace closer, not to threaten, to clarify, his voice lowered not in volume but in weight. Paper remembers who lies to it. The line fell cold between them, short, final, it did not need repeating. The man's shoulders sank just a fraction, not defeat, recognition. He understood now that the pass had been a question, not a key. Bumpy continued, gentle. You didn't use the rear. No. You didn't ask why. No. You tried to borrow authority. The man nodded once. There it was, no shouting, no denial. The truth had surfaced because it had nowhere else to go. The internal deadline did not tick. It pressed. By nightfall, the city would decide whether this man's name still connected to doors or drifted into memory's gaps. Bumpy reached out and took the pass. He did not tear it. He did not mark it. He folded it once more slowly, then handed it back. The man looked confused. I thought. Keep it, Bumpy said. That was worse than punishment. The pass would exist longer. It would fail publicly. It would teach without instruction. Bumpy stepped back. We're done, he said. The man lingered, searching for something else to say. Bumpy did not give him space for it. As the man walked away, Harlem resumed its pace around him, not hostile, just uninterested. Doors opened for others. Conversations continued over his shoulder. Bumpy turned toward the street. The certainty was set. He asked no final question out loud. The city would answer it soon enough. What happens to a name when it stops opening doors? The street did not turn to watch him go. That was the lesson finishing its work. The man moved with care now, as if careful steps could repair a poor understanding. He passed a tailor who had once greeted him by name. The tailor nodded to someone else. He passed a cafe where a chair was always free near the window. The chair stayed occupied. Nothing was denied. Nothing was explained. That was how Harlem judged. Bumpy Johnson did not follow. He never did. Power that chased was already uncertain. He walked the opposite direction, letting the space between them stretch into absence. The pass remained with the man, folded twice now, creased just enough to show it had lived. By afternoon, word moved without mouths. Not gossip, recognition. Doors that once opened slowed their hands. Faces that once leaned forward leaned back. Polite delays replaced welcome. Each pause felt accidental. Together, they formed a pattern. Bumpy sat where he could see reflections in a shop window. The glass showed the street behind him more clearly than the one ahead. He watched men approach corners and adjust their paths before realizing why. That adjustment mattered. It meant the city had decided. The phone rang once more. He tried 2 places, the voice said. And Bumpy asked. They asked him to wait. That was enough. Waiting was the city's soft refusal. Time stretched in rooms that had no intention of changing their minds. Bumpy ended the call. He did not move. He let the afternoon finish arranging itself. The pass worked exactly as intended, not as access, as exposure. As evening approached, the man crossed the block again. He saw Bumpy and stopped, uncertain now whether stopping was allowed. He did not approach. He did not speak. He stood, then turned away. That was the final confirmation. Bumpy rose and walked past him, close enough for the man to feel the weight without hearing a word. No touch, no look, just proximity. Judgment does not require witnesses. Later, when the light thinned and the street lamps warmed, the rear entrance remained unchanged. The ledger stayed closed. No mark was added. That absence was deliberate. The man did not return. Not that night, not by morning. The city absorbed him into its quiet margins, where people existed without doors and learned to stop asking why. Bumpy stood once more near the rear entrance, hand resting near the wall, not touching the handle. The paper pass appeared briefly in the man's hand across the street, then disappeared into a pocket for the last time. A habit formed without instruction. Passes were checked twice now, not for ink, for understanding. Bumpy turned away, work finished without spectacle. The question lingered, unanswered and certain, settling into the street like dust. When authority is offered as a test, do you know whether you are being invited or measured? By the time night leaned back into Harlem, the city had already made room for its decision. Not loudly, not at once. Decisions like this moved through habits first, through pauses, through the way a hand hovered over a door handle a second longer than before. Bumpy Johnson noticed those seconds. He stood near the corner where the street bent slightly, enough to confuse new eyes. He did not watch people directly. He watched the spaces they left open and the ones they closed without knowing why. That was where truth lived now. The man with the pass moved differently. He had learned to slow down, thinking slowness might read as confidence. He adjusted his coat more than the weather required. He nodded first now, before anyone could choose whether to nod back. These were small changes. Harlem noticed them all. The pass stayed with him. Folded, creased, still clean enough to suggest hope, still official enough to tempt explanation. Bumpy did not send anyone. He did not ask for updates. When something is inevitable, watching it too closely can feel like doubt. He trusted the city to finish what it had started. The rear entrance stayed closed. Not locked, not guarded, closed in the way a mouth closes when it has nothing left to say. The ledger inside remained blank for that day. That absence pressed harder than ink ever could. Morning had set the deadline without asking permission. By morning, men either understood where they stood or found themselves standing alone. The man tried again. Not the club, somewhere smaller, a place where familiarity once did the work that paper pretended to do. He waited near the door, pass ready in his pocket, rehearsing the tone he would use, respectful, casual, as if belonging could be spoken back into shape. Inside, a voice said, "1 moment." Moment stretched. Others were served, others were welcomed. The door opened and closed without acknowledging him. No refusal came, no explanation followed. Waiting did the job quietly. That was when the pass became heavy. Paper did that when belief left it. He stepped away, anger rising just enough to be noticed by himself, not enough to act on. Acting now would have made things worse. He knew that much. Harlem taught men that early. Across the street, Bumpy watched reflections in a shop window. The man appeared there briefly, smaller than he remembered himself. Bumpy did not move. A phrase passed through the city, not spoken, just understood. He doesn't have it anymore. What he didn't have was never named. Authority does not announce when it withdraws. It simply stops responding. Bumpy walked past the rear entrance once more as night settled in. He did not pause. He did not touch the door. His presence alone was enough to remind the street that some rules did not age. The man crossed paths with him again, accidental this time. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He had learned something important. Explanations were invitations to be corrected. Bumpy said nothing. That silence confirmed everything. Later, under street lamps that softened faces and sharpened mistakes, the man stood alone near the curb. He took the pass out at last, looked at it as if it might speak now that people would not. It did not. Paper does not rescue men, it records them. Bumpy turned down another block, already finished with the night. The internal deadline had arrived and passed without ceremony. By morning, the city would treat the man as it treated empty space, present but unused. The certainty settled in fully then. If nothing stops you, Bumpy had learned long ago, nothing proves you were allowed at all. The street absorbed that truth and kept moving. The man learned this not all at once, but in small, undeniable moments that stacked without mercy. A greeting that never came back. A question answered with delay instead of warmth. A door opened wide for someone behind him, then closed again without apology. No one told him he was finished. They let him discover it himself. He walked the block slower now, not from caution but from calculation. He tried to remember where he had once belonged without effort. Memory betrayed him. Places that once felt natural now felt staged, like sets left behind after a play moved on. The past stayed in his pocket. He touched it more often than he meant to. Each time it felt thinner. Paper did that when it lost meaning. It reminded you of what you believed it could do. Bumpy Johnson did not appear again that night. That absence mattered. When Bumpy was present, the rules were clear. When he was absent, the rules remained anyway. That was the difference between power that needed reinforcement and power that had settled into the bones of a place. The man reached the edge of Harlem where familiarity thinned. He stopped there, unsure whether stepping farther would help or harm. Beyond that line, names meant less. Inside it, his meant nothing now. He turned back. Near the rear entrance, the alley looked the same as it always had. Wet brick, dim light, the door resting in its frame like it had never moved. For a moment, hope rose, not strong, just persistent. He approached slowly. Not with the pass raised, not with confidence, with humility that came too late to be useful. He stood there and waited. The door did not open. It did not reject him either. It stayed as it was, uninterested. The ledger inside did not shift. No footsteps came. Waiting stretched. This time it worked against him. Waiting without invitation is how men learn they are alone. Across the street, a couple passed, laughing softly. Someone else took the long way around the alley, choosing not to notice him at all. That hurt more than a hard refusal would have. The man stepped back. He understood now that the pass had not been a mistake. It had been accurate. It showed him exactly where he stood when no one was correcting the picture. He unfolded it. The stamp was still clear, the ink unbroken. It could have fooled anyone who did not know better. Harlem knew better. He folded it again, slower this time. The crease deepened. Paper learns when it is handled honestly. By the time he left the block, the city had already adjusted to his absence. The spaces he once occupied closed without sound. Habits formed around new names. The world did not pause to mark the change. That was the final lesson. Bumpy returned to the club before dawn, not because he needed to, but because some endings deserve witness. He stood near the rear entrance and listened. The street breathed evenly. No tension, no anticipation. The ledger stayed clean. He reached out once and touched the door handle. Just once. It was cool, solid, unchanged. That was the concrete truth. Doors do not remember men. Cities do. Bumpy stepped away. He did not look back. The unanswered question settled fully now, no longer pressing, just present. When the city stops responding to you, do you still exist? Or are you just moving through unused space? Morning would arrive soon. It would find everything already in its place. The night returned without asking who was missing. That was how Harlem confirmed its decisions, not with noise, with continuity. The streetlights hummed the same. The music drifted from the same windows. The rear entrance waited in the same place, unchanged, unimpressed. Bumpy Johnson arrived just before the hour when late nights turn honest. He stood where he always did, a few steps from the rear door, close enough to feel its presence without claiming it. The wall held the day's warmth. The air carried the city's familiar weight. The man did not appear. That absence mattered more than any apology ever could. Bumpy did not check his watch. He did not need to. The internal deadline had already passed. When men miss their moment, time stops counting them. The paper pass surfaced once more. Not in a hand, not at a door. It lay folded on the edge of a crate near the alley, placed carefully, almost respectfully. Someone had returned it without returning themselves. Bumpy looked at it. He did not pick it up right away. Paper could wait. Consequences had already arrived. The pass was creased now, its false authority worn thin by use and misunderstanding. The stamp was still sharp. That was the irony. Systems remain intact long after men misuse them. Bumpy reached down and took it between two fingers. Light, meaningless now. He unfolded it slowly, smoothing the crease without removing it. He read nothing new. The paper said what it always had: rear entrance, one use, permission implied, never guaranteed. He folded it again and slid it into the ledger, not writing the man's name, not marking the page, just placing the paper between sheets where it would dry and disappear into record without explanation. That was the concrete consequence. Not removal, not punishment, archival silence. Inside the club, someone laughed too hard. Someone else hushed them. Order corrected itself without instruction. Bumpy stepped back into his place near the door. He did not wait for anything now. Waiting had ended. What remained was habit. Men passed through the alley who had never known the man and never would. New faces learned old rules without being taught. That was how power lasted. A runner approached, paused, then spoke. "He won't be back," he said. Bumpy nodded. "I know." That was the end of it. No body, no story, no warning passed down, just an absence that settled into the block like dust and stayed there. Bumpy turned his head slightly toward the door, then away again. Some things did not need guarding once they were understood. The city breathed, the rear entrance listened. And somewhere in that quiet, a question rested without asking to be answered. When you are removed without being touched, what proof remains that you were ever allowed to stay? The night kept going. Nothing followed. That was the final shape of it. No search, no rumor, no late explanation whispered into corners. Harlem did not need closure when the lesson was complete. The city simply adjusted its weight and moved forward. By morning, the crate in the alley was gone. The space where the pass had rested returned to being just space. No mark remained. That was deliberate. Records belong inside. Absences belong outside. Bumpy Johnson walked the block once, not inspecting, not checking. Walking the way a man walks through something that already agrees with him. Heads nodded. Doors behaved. The rear entrance remained what it had always been, a boundary that did not argue. Inside, the ledger held the paper between its pages. It would dry there, flatten, become indistinguishable from the others that had passed through and failed quietly. Years later, no one would remember whose it had been, only that it existed. That was enough. Bumpy sat with a cup of coffee that went cold without being noticed. Cold did not bother him. It meant the room was still. Stillness was earned. A habit had formed overnight. Men now checked understanding before checking ink. Roots were confirmed by memory, not shortcuts. The rear entrance listened longer before opening. It did not open less often. It opened more correctly. The man's name faded without resistance, not erased, replaced by time. Harlem was efficient that way. Bumpy stood once more near the rear door, hand near the wall, never on the handle. That gesture remained unchanged. Authority does not reinvent itself after every lesson. Someone new approached the alley, younger, careful, watching the space rather than the door. He did not ask for anything. He waited. Bumpy looked at him, then at the door. "Not yet." The man nodded and stepped back without instruction. That was the city working as designed. Bumpy turned away, coat settling on his shoulders. The absence had done its job. One false pass had taught 100 men something they would never say out loud. There was no satisfaction in it, only balance. As he walked off, the quiet aftermath held. One concrete consequence remained, a ledger page that held paper instead of a name. No sermon followed. No warning needed to be issued. The moral weight stayed where it belonged, in the space between doors and those who approached them. The final question did not chase anyone. It waited, patient and unanswerable, for the next man who believed permission was something that could be borrowed. When a city records you without naming you, are you remembered, or already gone? The rear entrance stayed closed. Not forever. Only until it mattered.